welcome to Junk to Jules podcast with Georgette Beck. Today, we have an interesting topic. Living death. A living death. I want a divorce. Maybe some of you have heard those words uttered. Maybe some of you have uttered those words. Goodness gracious, I seriously pray not. For many, on their wedding days, 7 promises of marriage were made between the bride and groom. You may remember to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others to love and cherish till death do us part. Sadly, 50% of all marriages end in divorce. Still, most folks remarry at some point, such as myself, and those subsequent marriages have an even higher chance of ending in divorce. The odds are there's probably a few of us in every room, wherever we go, that there's someone we personally know that went through a divorce or went through it as a child or have friends or peers, coworkers. It's so prevalent in our society today. And I myself went through a divorce as well. And I gotta say, sadly, in my first marriage, we married very young. So that was one of the things that did not help our cause. It was a generational repeat, I found out later. But I want a divorce was something that we used to share how serious we were about wanting to end things, or not end things, to work things out. We wanted things to be better. We just wanted the other partner to know, take this seriously. So divorce, and those who have been through it will understand why I say a divorce is a living death. There is really no closure, not ever. Oh, there may be healing, which is a good thing, but no closure. What there are plenty of are wounds, a lot of sorrow, grief for all involved. The bride and groom walk away devastated, usually, unless, the initiating partner may walk away stronger since they were the one contemplating it a lot longer and made that final decision, so it was in their control of what was happening. But rest assured, there are all sorts of emotions each partner experiences, and you know who suffers the most? The children. Yes, the children. Well into their adulthoods. Honestly, they carry this disappointment way further into their adulthoods. This disappointment and devastation. Forever. They carry it. Believe me, I know. In my family, I'm blessed. My family received a miracle. So when my parents, they went through a separation a few times. So we went through that. Going to dad's on the weekends. But mom and dad were actually best friends. So we'd often come out in the living room in the morning and find mom on the couch. And Jesus saved my mom and dad's marriage. Our family got born again, and they accepted Jesus into their hearts, and they remarried in the church. So I'm blessed to have that family reunited, and then they continued on in their marriage. So the effects do last long after. And even in my own, I got to tell you, there was one day when somebody said, I want a divorce, and they meant it. And I remember that day crystal clear. It was in the kitchen of our dream home on Hart Road. And my husband and I were having a disagreement. And the words got used, and they were meant this time. He agreed. He said, yes, yes. Okay, that's it. We're getting a divorce. And I remember I found myself on my knees, bleeding and crying. No, you don't mean it. You don't mean it. You don't want a divorce. What about our baby girl? She was a couple years old. What about our family? What about our future? We love each other. We've come this far. We've worked through so many things. See, in our relationship before the marriage, there were signs that maybe this was not the match God selected for me. There were so many signs and hints along the way. He was a workaholic like my dad. They worked very hard, but relationships came second. Like it wasn't the priority. Him being late, him canceling events and dates. And my goodness, we did not have the same path for our lives. I didn't know it at the time. I was supposed to go to Oral Roberts University, but out of fear of loss of love, I did not go, and I stayed, and we married, and I was about 17, 18 years old. And the night before our wedding rehearsal, we're moving into the house it's going to be. We're moving our items in. And he shares that for his bachelor's party, his brother took him to a strip club. That was the largest red sign ever that this person was not meant for me. You see, that bothered me a lot. That actually crushed my heart. I had him on such a pedestal, and that's the other problem. If you have anything before God, it's idolatry. It'll fall. You won't. That's the other reason I lost it. I lost that relationship, and that's one of the reasons, because I put needing him and needing his love of what I perceived that was above God. Things you learn later. It's such wisdom comes later. But I cried my eyes out, and he was so sorry. And he said he was forced to. He's 6'2". My gosh. Anyways, that was the last of the red signs, but you already got up to that point. Was I really going to be brave enough to say this isn't going to work out? No, I was too very much insecure, such low self-esteem, low self-worth. I would not have had the courage. And I blamed the brother. So anyways, let's talk about the living death. So all kinds of things go on, and no one understands the effects of all the emotions that run you over suddenly. So I was on the floor of that kitchen. He walked out the door, slammed the door, and left. I eventually found myself getting up and walking up our stairs to the second floor of our house. I walked into our bedroom, looked out the windows. It was a gorgeous view. We were on a corner lot, beautiful wooded lot on a little brook. We had the brook as our view. I walked into my walk-in closet, shut the door, looked around, and I think I just shattered and collapsed onto the floor and just was weeping, uncontrollable weeping. I had such fear all of a sudden just overtake, and the grief. So I was crying and crying and crying until there was no more tears, and I'm still like weeping silently, crying out to God, to Daddy God, I call him. Abba Father, God, I called. Please help me. Please rescue me. I was so afraid. I had no idea what was going to happen. Who was going to take care of me? What was going to happen to my daughter and I? It was scary. I was alone. It was just abandonment, rejection. I was rejected. You felt all those things. Nobody loves me was what I was thinking. I am unwanted. Oh my gosh. It just went on, and I prayed, and I took out I saw this heart-shaped box where I kept all our cards through the years, and I read through every single one that we wrote to each other. I kept them all for Valentine's Day, for birthdays, Christmases, and I saw our words to each other. And we did truly love each other for what we knew how to do then. And there was a lot of our I'm sorry's in there. That resonated. I saw that. We had a lot of struggles. I was lonely in a marriage, and I almost had an affair, but God stopped it. Thank goodness he protected us. And that's what finally pushed it over. But there was years. I had no idea where my husband was at night. He was working all of these jobs, or was he? I don't know. Later, now I begin to ponder. He was just never home. And we got, there was signs. One day I went to the beauty parlor, and oh my gosh, I wrote an essay on that story and it received an A+. But this male beautician, I always had females, and this male beautician's washing my hair, like massaging the head. and something just broke inside me. It was so scary. Something just broke and I could barely get out of there in time because all these emotions just come up. I cried all the way home from, we were in, Milford, downtown Milford, all the way to West Haven. And I wept uncontrollably. I had no idea why I was crying so hard, but it was because something was very wrong in the marriage. It was such an intimate gesture. And that's what was lacking in our marriage, that close intimacy from emotional relationship. Anyhow, God heard that rescue prayer. I prayed and prayed, and then I'm in the floor of the closet again, fast forward. And I hear my daughter cry out. So at some point, I got up and I was like, I got to get to my daughter. I felt like God heard me. I asked, I hope he heard me. I just kind of knew he did. And you know what? He did. He heard me. So the first things that come in when your crisis situation like that hits is there is shock. There's utter shock, and it's hard. It's awful. And I was in that shock for months. And then the clarity about this is really happening. It takes a long time, but it soaks in that your marriage is going to end. Like, this is a real reality. And of course, you're hoping for a miracle. I hoped to the very end that my marriage would be saved, and I prayed it would be. And I hoped it would be with all my heart. But fear and anxiety moved in as well, along with the shock. An impending divorce feels like you're stepping into an abyss, as it did for me. A deep one. Fear of the future, fear, the financial fears, fear of being alone, what's going to happen to your children, yourself, and you're living with someone who hates you, or the other way around, like whoever. It's horrible. It's sad. And guilt comes in various forms. I blamed me. Like, I saw all my failures and I took ownership of them. Later, God showed me it's not all you. A marriage takes two all along the way, from the beginning to the very end. It's 100% on each side. There's mutual responsibility and accountability. It's not just one person to hold up the whole marriage. And in mine, that's what it was. I was the one holding up home base. I was the one holding up the relationship aspects of it. But we had accountability. I messed up too. There's things I could have done differently all along the way as well. And, a lot of things. So that shock comes. And I remember God, the very first thing he did in my own rescue story, the rescue had begun unbeknownst to me. I found out in the days to come. But the very first act of God's rescue, that he heard my prayers, he used my sister-in-law to hand me a CD, a music CD from a movie, The Preacher's Wife. And if you've got to get that CD and listen to every single song and every lyric. The hold on, I got you, like, hold on. Literally, I would be in my car crying to that music. It was so beautiful. Every song spoke to my heart. It was like God just pulled me up on his lap and hugged me, put his arms around me. I felt his love so large in those words, in those songs. And I knew every word by heart, every song by heart, every tune, every lyric. I sang in that car. I cried. And that started the rescue. And then when I was not in right mind, it was not a safe time. It was not a healthy time. I don't know how I got to work or home, but I would go out at night because if he was in the house, I had to leave. It just was so hard and sad. There was such anger, unforgiveness, bitterness. It was not a good scenario. And I would drive around and then, one of the things, people do, smoke, you drink, you do drugs. I didn't do drugs, but I was drinking wine, and I drank a lot. And I don't know how I got home lots of times. It was a long drive home from where I would go out with friends, and God kept me. God kept me. And I was going to move out. All of a sudden I thought in my head that I have to move out. Because my husband wasn't leaving, and the marriage was going to be over, and he hated me, and it was not a good environment. So I actually thought I had to move out with my daughter. It was not a good time. And I found a condo, but get this, the condo had a loft. And that's going to be where my baby girl was going to sleep. There were no walls. It was up on a couple stairs up. It was not a safe thing for a child. I signed the tentative lease. Oh my goodness gracious. But then God used my mom and dad, who were already in Florida, to come in and do the other aspect of his rescue plan. God had a rescue plan in place and he set it about, and they came to visit us in the winter, and they neutralized the situation. It was God all the way. My ex-husband had his family where we were, the house, his businesses, and my family had already moved to Florida. My job was where we were, and I had a really good job, and I loved that job. And I was there for 7 years. It was a beautiful place to be. And I learned so much there, and the people were so good to me, and they appreciated me. They valued what I brought to the table, and it was really nice. And I resigned from that job because that conversation with my mom and dad around the table, something happened in my ex-husband's heart, and it neutralized the whole situation. He decided to move us to Florida to give our marriage a second chance. And I know you can't move places to solve a problem, just like, a lot of people have children to solve marriage problems, or no, you have to solve yourselves first. But it was part of God's plan to move us, to uproot us, and to get us to Florida, the sunshine state of Florida. And it was a good plan, guys. I told the lady that I signed that lease to, we couldn't do it. And she knew I was going through a bad situation. She had gone through the same situation years before in her life, but she was desperate and she needed money for that condo. She was behind in taxes. Come to find out, later she sued me. We worked it out later, but that was a nightmare on top of nightmares. We packed up. I gave my notice. I resigned. My branch manager said, "Why are you doing this? You've got real great potential here in the growth. There's career. There's a good ladder here, success upward." But I said, I have to know that I gave everything I have to save my marriage, everything I have. And you know what? I did. And so I have that in my heart. I gave it all. But marriage takes two, remember, all along the way. And if you're going to try to rescue your marriage, there can't be any third parties or third things distracting the focus. Both parties have to be 100% invested into healing what needs to be healed, take accountability for what needs to be taken accountability of, get educated, get counseling, get help, and all of that. So God had me on that journey solo. So he moved us, we got to Florida, and this is what Junk to Jewels, A Journey from Brokenness and Despair, my first book, is all about. It's a love story. It's how God heard a woman's heart crying out on the floor of a closet, and he responded. So there's more to come on that. So all kinds of emotions come in, and I just want to speak to you. If you're going through it right now, if a relationship just ended, or if there's talks of it, first off, don't use divorce in the marriage. Not ever. Not ever. You don't even say that there's potential that this relationship will end. Whatever you believe will be. Self-fulfilling prophecy is a reality. Never use that word. There's never a question mark. Any relationship you commit to, you're in it. You committed. There's loyalty and trust and honesty. Hopefully, those things need to be key. But you never use it. If there's issues in a relationship, you ask for help. Agree to counseling. And eventually, it takes two. So if there's only one of you holding the relationship, that's a big problem right there. You can't hold it by yourself. You can't. I know. I couldn't. So anyhow, the guilt, sadness, those are all normal feelings. The shock, the death of a dream. When you made your vows, there's the death of the dream. There's the death of the vows. There's a death of hope for the future. You have no idea now what the future looks like. You have no idea what the separation period's going to be like. Are you going to experience a miracle? Those were my questions. You have to stay in it for the long haul, and you don't give up at a drop of a hat. Do you know how many people, including my parents, that they hung in and they worked on it and they didn't give up and they experienced a lot of beautiful years together because of it? I have a friend in Ireland and I would love to run into her ever again. So her maiden name was Yvonne Brennan. And if you ever see me or hear this, I want to connect with you. She was a dear friend who we wrote letters to a long time during my single mom years. And I met her at that job that I love so much in Connecticut, Chubb Group of Insurance Company. And she shared about her parents, that they had come to a rough spot in their marriage and they wanted to call it quits, but it was illegal to get a divorce back then where they were. Years later, they celebrated a big number anniversary, and boy, was everyone in that family so happy that divorce was not allowed. And they worked it through. A lot of marriages do work through the tough stuff. There is hope for healing. And there's a lot of factors into those things. So mine could not have the healing, as you'll learn, and when you read the book and hear the story as we talk through the episodes coming up. But God started a healing journey within me and my daughter, my little girl, Jessie. He set us up in a beautiful community, Pinewood Point Apartments. He surrounded us with a close-knit, fun community. We were right across a pool, a laundry room, so doing laundry was not hard. We made it part of the fun routine of the day and sit out by the pool. That's where we got to know all our neighbors. Our building alone was number 7. I think my apartment was 1707. It was set, or maybe just 7. And that's one of God's numbers. It was so cool. His signature was on everything. And then from there, we found a beautiful Christian church because we were looking for a Christian school for my daughter to transition to. And we found Morningside Academy. And I walked into their office and I felt like, oh my goodness, such peace and love. And I was treated so nicely and lovingly. And from there, we went to the church. It was just one step to the next. God just intervened and it was divine appointments. And then we were in that church family. And the very first thing God restored, do you know God's a restorer of destiny? So in high school, I was trying out for the softball team at the end of my freshman year. I made it all the way to the last of the tryouts and the practices, but I chickened out. I found out later it was fear of criticism, fear of being judged. I was so insecure and thought I was so overweight, so fat, so ugly. I was so embarrassed that I would mess up and people would laugh at me. I couldn't show up, but I was meant to be on that team. See, God has a detailed plan for each of us, and he created us in the womb, and his loving touches were all unique and different with different gifts. And being on that softball team would have helped me grow and heal from my insecurity. And do you know God restored that? The very first thing that happened at Morningside Church was I was invited onto a co-ed softball team. And that's where I started getting love from God through other people and got to know people in the church. And from the church, I saw in a bulletin one day that they were looking for, there was a position open at a crisis pregnancy services, they were called at the time. Now they're CareNet. And I applied for that job. It was administrative assistant. So here is God plugging me in all of these healthy, safe environments with healthy, good people. It was a Christian nonprofit that helped people. And I got to be there, surrounded by these beautiful ladies and a lot of men that my brothers in Christ, sisters in Christ. I got to learn all about that, about people who show up for each other. It was beautiful. So anyways, all the emotions, I was surrounded by help so that I wouldn't sink, because you feel like you're going to sink. You feel like you don't want to wake up. You don't want to live. I had prayed that my heart would stop many of a time because the pain was so intense. It was too much. And then I realized, no, I have to be here for my daughter. My daughter needs me. So God, I do want to not be here, but I need to be with my daughter. So help us. And he did. Counseling was another other thing that came to us. So being at the nonprofit, there's I'm looking down at my notes. There's free counseling to those in need. And Apparently my coworkers thought I could qualify. I definitely qualified for being in need, and I definitely qualified for someone who needed the help, and I definitely qualified for needing financial assistance. So I got hooked up with free counseling, and that helped neutralize the situation a bit too. And then I was invited to a spirit-led Bible study that was just starting up with these new ladies. And so the second piece, so becoming aware of all the feelings that hit you, it seems like the death of your hopes and dreams. So being aware of what's happening, you're in it. Understand that it is a death. If you've lost a loved one, there's closure there eventually, but you are in the weeds. You are drowning in the grief and sorrow, and it hits you sometimes all at once, sometimes at a moment that takes you by surprise. But just be aware. Then there's anger that comes up. Be aware of all the emotions, all the feelings. Anger at yourself for your failures. Maybe angry at the other person. Why couldn't they just agree to get counseling? Or why didn't they care about us enough to really take this relationship seriously and get help? There's all kinds of things. And then you feel bad about the children. Look what we did. It's all those things. But work through it. I work through those emotions, and counseling helped me realize, we have to work through forgiveness. But the next important thing is support is critical. And that's what God was doing. I didn't even know it. He was surrounding me with a support system in so many layers. The community where I lived, in the church family, Bible study, softball, and then there was another evangelism explosion class starting up. So that was, all right, let's go. I was invited into that. I was getting biblical knowledge instilled into my heart, the scriptures, the root of it all. I had loved God since I was a little girl. I had invited Jesus into my life and became born again when my family received Jesus and saved my dad and mom's marriage, and our family as a whole unit was preserved, our legacy. But I did all the talking to God. I did not know He knows us so personally. I did not know His plan for our lives were so personal and unique to each of us. I did not know this. But when I cried out on the floor of my closet, that's when that began a new journey in my faith life and my spiritual walk with the Lord. I knew it was personal. It was a two-way relationship. He showed up for me in so many ways. His love for me was unconditional, and that got tested. I tried to be a good girl. I'm a type A firstborn. I'm a rule follower usually. So I was trying to be good by just trying to do right things. No. Salvation is unconditional. It's a gift. It's grace. We don't earn it, not ever. It's what Jesus did for us on the cross. He came, He was sent, and He came, and He lived amongst us, and He died on the cross. He died for us, and He rose again. 3 days later, He rose. And the Bible has that full account. And so he was surrounding me with support, professional support, counselors, seniors, elders in the church, people who prayed for me, who showed up, who checked on me and my daughter. We were plugged in. I went up to the altar Sunday after Sunday. I can't even tell you how many times, over and over. I never stopped asking for help from God. My prayer life took off. My faith started growing. I learned about these things. These spiritual leaders like Miss Margaret, Miss Joyce, they were my spiritual mamas, and they never gave up on us girls. And they led lives that showed the example. They were true mentors, and they were true leaders in the faith by just living it out loud every day. And they saw us, and they never gave up on us, and they didn't judge me. I was messed up back then. I was really messed up. And even now, we all have our ways. We all have some weirdness in us. But they didn't judge. And then when I messed up in God, and when I messed up in my walk, I made mistakes. I thought all the help God was sending my daughter and I thought He was going to stop. I thought I was really going to be in it. He was providing my rent. Every time I tried to make sense of the dollars, it just never added up. He was taking care of us. And I was so scared He was going to abandon me. And He didn't. See, God doesn't abandon us, not ever. And that's when I started really understanding His love and what unconditional love is. It was beautiful. So take care of yourself physically. Take care of yourself. the drinking too much or drugs or anything that you're trying to self-medicate on, shopping too much, credit cards. Let's love ourselves enough to ask for the help. There is so much help. 211 in our area is a number we call to get resources. There's so many nonprofits. We have a nonprofit now, Belly Healing Hearts Foundation, that serves single parent families. We refer to each other. Wherever you can find a leg up, CareNet offers clothes for moms, food, Treasure Coast Food Bank. Look around, Google what you need, and there's some help out there in the community. And yeah, it's hard to ask for help, but you can, and it's just for a time. And the church helped us pay rent a few times. My Christian family members got us Christmas presents. Anyhow, take care of yourself physically. Go to a doctor. Get evaluated. Ask for help. Financial help. Counselors. There's financial experts that would be happy to sit down with you. Engage in the self-care. Engage. Set yourself up for a plan. And focus on your future. This is not going to last forever this season. It's only dark for a season. And then focus on the good communication with your ex, especially in those first moments. It's critical. But understand, you do want to hope for a miracle, but understand boundaries for yourself are utmost. You are worthy of respect. You are worthy. If someone is not speaking kindly to you or treating you not so nicely, don't put up. Listen, yes, we're going to be polite, but no. And this is what I did. I allowed someone to treat me not so nicely or speak to me not so nicely because I was so afraid for that loss of relationship. I was believing we would be best friends forever. And that's the ultimate hope. The marriage to be saved or be best friends forever so you could be co-parents and do co-parenting well. That happens for a lot of people. And it didn't happen in the way I'd had hoped for myself, but we make the best of it. But do understand, you are worthy of respect. So treat others with respect. Treat someone as you wish to be treated. If there's too much emotion, if it's too volatile, if there's too much anger still and unforgiveness, keep the communications just to email. It's okay. You don't have to text all of the time. Get into a routine, establish visiting for the children, get the courts involved only when it's time and you have to. Because once that part starts, that does go a lot quicker for a divorce to occur. Anyway, seek legal advice. There are attorneys that will sit down with you pro bono just to give you that initial counsel meeting. Ask. There are so many books out there. There's podcasts. And again, there's so many of us that have been through it. And the biggest thing, even if you're just in the beginning part of it, there's a group called Divorce Care. My husband and I are he's going to be back on as a guest for the podcast because we're going to share about our years of being a lay minister and facilitating divorce care groups. We did that for about 7 years. We got to see so many hearts healed. And yes, a lot of marriages were saved, but hearts were healed. And future marriages are saved because you learned so much in that healing process. But it starts with you. Take charge of you. You're responsible. You can do it. You can stand. You're going to be okay. I'm hugging you. I am seeing you. It's going to be okay if you're in the midst of the beginning of a crisis, of a living death. I pray for your miracle to happen, but either way, you're going to have a miracle occur in your heart and in your emotions. And it's you along the way saying yes to faith, yes to God and Jesus. That's my foundation that did it for me. And then books, a lot of great books, good stories, good affirmations, good quotes, scriptures galore. Those are the promises that keep you. I remember the first one, the fear not one kept me. I was so afraid, but God helped. And he wants to help you too. Keep in touch. Follow us. Go to georgettebeck.com. Sign up for the e-newsletter. Stay in touch. bellyhealinghearts.org is for those single moms and dads. Reach out for some mentoring. There's a support group starting up with Calvary PSL, but our podcasts go out. The time this goes out, just look for a support group for single and parenting. I know Calvary PSL, we're partnering with them to do it, starting up soon, actually, in February of 2024, February 8th. So the time you hear this, that group may have already ended and concluded, but there may be more. But reach out, look on website, get into a divorce care. Yeah, we love you. God loves you. Have a blessed day. Reach out for help. And if you are on the healing end, you already healed, and you would like to be a guest on this podcast, and you have a junk to jewel story and overcoming, whatever your story is, reach out. Go to georgettebeck.com, click on the podcast page, and share your story with me. We'd love to get to know you. And maybe you'll be on this podcast as a guest to encourage and inspire others in their healing journeys. So thanks for listening or watching today. And you matter. And don't forget, if you're not following Georgette Beck on Facebook or Instagram, please go ahead and follow. And then please download this show and follow Junk to Jewels podcast with Georgette Beck. We have several guests coming along to share their challenging moments and their inspiration. Thank you for listening and watching. Take care.